Hi, my name is Rabbi Adam Greenwald, and I'm director of the Miller Introduction to Judaism program at American Jewish University, and I'm joined by my friend,
Father Alexi Smith. I'm the Ecumenical and Interreligious Officer for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles.
and together we're taking part in this series of videos from the Los Angeles Priest-Rabbi Dialogue, which is a joint project of the LA Archdiocese and also the Board of Rabbis of Southern California. And I'm so glad to be together for this conversation about the evolution of our idea of God over the course of the history of our tradition. So over the course of thousands of years, we have seen all sorts of different ideas of God come into the forefront, and also ideas maybe recede away, becoming more popular, less popular. How have you seen, in very broad strokes, the evolution of the idea of God in the church?
Well, within my own lifetime, which is a little bit more than yours, I remember in elementary school, and I was in a parochial school here in the Archdiocese, we were never taught really directly about God, to know God. We were taught all about God, but never to know God in the sense of developing any type of relationship with Him. That would be something Protestants would do. That's what they would tell us. Okay. And so our image of God, especially in those formative years, was of this God of the thunderbolts and the judgment and the wrath. If you didn't obey the commandments, you were going to suffer. That's changed, thanks be to God. Not only as we individuals matured, but as a church, I think, matured. And there is still the aspect of judgment, yes, but there's also the aspect of the God of love and mercy and understanding.
So how do you think that that evolution happens? Like, how do you go from a perspective of a more judgmental and more distant God to a God who's more immanent, caring, and loving, just over the short number of years of your own lifetime?
Well, I thank you for the short number of years, but I see that as we then also, the Catholic Church also began to emphasize the idea of entering into a relationship with God. And once you get to know God,
God becomes less scary.
less scary,
Yeah.
less vindictive, you know?
I love
Like
that.
a good parent, like a good parent.
I love that distinction that you're making about knowing about God versus knowing God, right? Talking about God in the abstract versus trying to have that direct relationship. You know, I think about one of my teachers who said, there are two ways to learn about love, right? You can learn about love from reading Romeo and Juliet, or you can learn about love by loving another person. And the first has its place, right? There's certainly a place for great descriptions of other people's love, but that's not a substitute for one's own relationship.
No.
And you know, I'm reflecting on my own religious upbringing, and I've got to say, I really resonate with what you have said. We were taught about God in very abstract ways, and the truth is actually very little about God at all in my Jewish upbringing. My Jewish upbringing focused on holidays, on values, on traditions, on culture, on prayer. But to actually talk about who God is or how God could act in your life or what your personal relationship with spirituality might be felt like a almost taboo kind of a subject
exactly.
in my own Jewish education. And it really wasn't until, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit silly, it wasn't until I got to rabbinical school. And I was a couple of years into rabbinical school, and one of my teachers challenged me and said, actually, Adam, you're going to spend the rest of your life talking with people about theology. Maybe you ought to develop one of your own. And I don't know how they let me into rabbinical school without a clear relationship with God, but I guess better to celebrate that I got to the party rather than mourn that I got there late.
Exactly right, exactly right.
In your own formation as a priest, what was your development of your relationship with God like in that process?
Well, I think it changed dramatically, actually. You may or may not remember that priesthood is a second career for me. So I was a businessman for about 15 years.
I'd forgotten that.
You've forgotten that. So when I entered the seminary, I was older than my confreres. I had much more life experience than they did, and certain degree, to a certain degree, even more experience of God than they had. Now,
More life.
More life. And they probably knew more about God from a theological point than I did, but they hadn't developed any type of interior relationship with Him. And during my formative years, our program is 4 years, that interior relationship really began to blossom. And I don't think it certainly hasn't ceased blossoming, but continues to grow, continues to manifest itself in aspects of knowing God that I certainly didn't know when I entered the seminary.
So I want to pick up on just one little word that you say and that I find myself saying too, which is the pronouns we use around God.
Yeah.
You talked about knowing Him.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you how you think about those pronouns. Do you think about God in male or female terms?
No.
And if not, how have you seen that develop over the course of your lifetime and in the thinking more broadly of your fellow Catholics?
Well, there's certainly, I mean, we use the term him from ancient times.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we should limit God to a male figure. If God is a spirit, then the spirit is there's no gender there.
Right.
There are certain aspects of Catholicism, certain members of the Catholic Church who would like us to drop that term.
Drop him entirely.
Yes. There are certain members of the Catholic Church when it comes to praying the creed, the creedal statement, on Sundays, where it refers to God as Him, will not say Him. Whether the Catholic Church is ever going to do that or not, I don't know. Beyond my competence here.
Sure.
But I think for me, it's just a convenient way of expressing a concept of God, but it's certainly not meant to think that I think of God only in the masculine sense.
Sure, of course.
What about you?
Well, so I do this activity with my students in the Introduction to Judaism program where I give them a list of 50 names of God that have been used at different points in the Jewish tradition. And I ask them to go through the list and to mark which names of God they feel close to, which names of God they feel distant from, and which names of God they are question marks for them. And it's so interesting to see how the different ways that God has been referred to in our tradition form their own theologies.
Sure.
Right? So some students will look at the list and they'll like all of the names that are Father, Shepherd, King, and some people will look at the list and they'll like things like Source or Oneness or Fountain of Life. And those two different people are both expressing a Jewish God idea, but they're expressing it in very different terms based on the words that they use.
Exactly.
You know, the God words that I was brought up with from the prayer book, even though we didn't talk much about God, were still God words that were very anthropomorphic. Ruler, king, parent. And I think part of my own religious evolution has been finding more resonance with words that feel a bit more abstract, but actually that I feel like I can get closer to.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. That word father, that term father,
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I attended a mass or liturgy celebrated by a friend of mine, and in his sermon, he referred to God, our Father, and how loving Father, and all of this. Well, a woman came up to him afterwards and actually lambasted him for using that term because she said, "How can you equate God with a father and want me to do that? My father abused me."
God.
And you understand where
Right,
she's coming
yeah.
from. Okay.
I,
So that term wouldn't resonate with her whatsoever.
I once heard somebody say, all theology is autobiography, right? All theology is based on the life experience that we have lived.
Yes.
And for somebody who says, God is my father, and who feels very comfortable with that, chances are they were brought up with a really good dad, right? And somebody who says, I don't want that term at all, may not have been as fortunate in that way.
Exactly.
And so I do think that not only our communities, but our individual selves evolves in our idea of God as our life story unfolds.
And I think those of us in clergy positions have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
That when we're speaking with people, not everyone's going to be of the same mindset perhaps as we are because of their own life experience.
Sure. What do you see as coming next? Like, what's around the bend for theology?
Ooh,
in
the current trend, the
Yeah.
next trend in theology?
Where is the church going in its relationship with God?
Well, I would hope that the church will go ever deeper into this relationship with God, experience God's love, God's mercy, God's understanding of us. After all, if we believe He created us, then He understands who we are, and what we do, and why we do it, and what we need from Him in order to change the way we do things. I would also like to see the church's theology move towards a more inclusive bent, if you will.
Yeah.
We are doing that now, but we need to be even more inclusive. In
It's
the
like
sense
God-
of...
No, please.
People often ask, Father, will so-and-so go to heaven? So-and-so is a Jew. Well, that's not for us to be discussing. This is up to God. You know? So why don't we just drop that whole aspect and focus on who God is for us and who we are for Him?
I love that. I love that sense that God is growing. God is getting bigger and bigger with time, and a bigger and bigger God has more room for more and more
everyone.
children.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. What about you? What would you like to see?
I think that the similar direction of re-engagement with God in the Jewish community is a really promising direction. I think, though, that move for us is less about an evolution of ideas and more, honestly, about distance from communal trauma. In the middle of the 20th century, between a third and a half of the Jewish community was wiped out in the Holocaust. And I think for a number of decades afterwards, as was very understandable, it was very difficult to talk about a loving, compassionate God in the presence of people who were survivors, who had lost family members. And as we move further and further from that trauma, it's not at all that we, of course, forget about that trauma, but that we heal as people do.
Yes.
And in our healing, become more open to re-engaging concepts that we might not have been able to touch in the depths of our pain. And so I see it as a really promising sign that in the last 10, 15 years, there have been more books published about Jewish spirituality than in the 50 years that preceded it. Because for those 50 years, we were too close to our trauma to be able to have that conversation.
yes.
And with a newer
was too
generation,
real.
it was too direct. It was too, the wound was too open. And for a new generation of religious leadership to be able to say, we hold on to that memory and mourn the pain of the past, and also we are now in a place where we can start to take leadership on a new, renewed Jewish relationship with God, I think is a very exciting thing and a very exciting thing to be a part of.
Certainly not trying to equate our present situation with the clergy abuse scandals,
Sure.
with the Holocaust, certainly not. But that same sense of people now wondering where God is in all of this,
Right.
as many asked in the Holocaust, where
Right,
was
of
God in
course.
all this? So maybe that's something we can learn from each other
Yeah.
and evolve that together.
If God is supposed to be, as the psalmist said, the healer of shattered hearts, right?
Yes.
Then,
Yes.
for all of the different ways that our hearts have been shattered
That's right.
by all different ways that human beings have fallen so terribly, terribly short,
Absolutely.
being part of the healing is, by definition, being part of creating a deeper relationship
Absolutely
with God.
right. Absolutely. I think that's the key,
Yeah.
the deeper relationship with God. Again, as a youth, we were taught, we never even read, believe this? We never even read the Bible in school. In a Catholic school, we were told, no, you don't have the Bible. We had Bible stories.
Got it.
Sacri-
But direct engagement, too dangerous.
No. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
Too dangerous. Now, thanks be to God, that mentality's gone, and we're moving the other direction.
Well, it does sound like exciting things ahead in both of our traditions.
Amen.
In a way that we are evolving and are coming to know and understand more deeply our spiritual relationship and God, and grateful to have your partnership and friendship in thinking about that work.
Likewise. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you.